Hi, I'm Marvin Wright, and I'm a retired dentist, now a sawdust maker, a woodworker, and I would like to show you a wood bowl that we have been making for ministers, family, and friends. That bowl is here, and the name of the bowl is From Creation to Salvation. The name was given to this type bowl by Mr. Stu Visser in Holland, Michigan, and I have not copied but have modified his bowl to make it easier for myself to turn. And in Stu's bowl and this bowl, we start with a dark bottom, and in the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth, it was without form and void. And so we use for this dark bottom, most of the time I use walnut, because walnut is dark and it is readily available here in Indiana. And then God said, let's make light. And so we have a light ring, and each ring now from the solid base up, each layer is 12 pieces cut and glued together and then turned on the wood lathe. So we use maple for the light ring, and above that is a people ring made out of sapelli. It's a brown wood, fine grain and all, and it represents Adam and Eve and the creation on day 6. And then Adam and Eve had to go eat the apple, and so sin entered the world, and so I use Wingy for this dark ring that represents the sin of the people Israel. And they were in their sin time for a long period of time. God tried a flood, he tried a Tower of Babel, he tried to get down. He tried prophets and judges to bring that people Israel back into his fold. It did not work, so he sent his son, Jesus the Christ, to the people, and he was not truly successful in getting them into his back into the fold because they shed his blood. He was crucified, and so this ring is Podoc. It's a ring of red-orange wood that will darken if you don't seal it real quickly. And the blood was shed for perhaps the 12 tribes of Israel, perhaps the 12 disciples, or perhaps for all of us, and I prefer to believe it was for all of us. And so the ring above the red ring is 12 different woods representing all of mankind. And so as I'm rotating that, you'll see there's a different wood in each segment. And the top ring is bird's eye maple, representing grace, the grace of God. And if you look at it carefully, you'll see that this ring extends out further than any of the other, and on the inside of the bowl, it extends inward and covers the entire bowl from top to bottom by the grace of God. This bowl is almost finished, and it's for the grandfather of my shop assistant. And so you can see that they're very colorful. This bigger bowl is going to a regional church office. It's almost finished, but I don't have the bottom finished on it yet. Before we get into making any bowls, I want to touch base with safety. And most of my safety information comes from the Mark Adams School of Woodworking. I'm wearing one of their shirts. The safety, if you keep your hand at least 3 inches away from a saw, you can't get cut because there's a 3-inch space between you and the saw blade. When you're running a table saw, do not stand in line with the blade, because if it kicks back a piece of wood, it will shoot you, and it hurts when it happens, because I know how it feels to get shot. And you don't want to get loose clothing tied up in a sander, because coming up real close and personal to a powerful belt-driven sander would not be fun. But I've seen people get their hand in the sander and lose some skin real quick. So stay off the sander and just use normal sets. The same thing with the wood lathe. If you're using a wood lathe and you had a tie on, and I don't know who would do something like that, but you had a tie on a wood lathe, it could pull you right down into that thing so quickly. So loose clothing, ties, all these things are big no-nos here in this wood shop. And if you watch, most people will have on short sleeves and a tight fitting shirt. And now we're ready to go over and show you what other safety thing that I use on the table saw to help prevent kickback on those small pieces. When you're doing a segmental bowl or any other wood project, one of the first considerations is the kind of wood and the colors of the wood that you might use. And these colors can become important if you're telling a story, as I am with this bowl. As you can see, I have 4 different woods here. We have 6 layers in the ring plus the walnut base. Well, I didn't get all 6 because this shows you what we're doing. The next thing is to prepare the wood for the segments, and these pieces are cut into about 1-inch squares. This is really a 3/4 inch by 1-inch square, but cut into segments that will work in the fabrication of a segmental bowl. Remember, they are 12 pieces cut at a 30-degree angle, total with 50 degrees on each end in each ring. And so I'm going to take this Podoc wood and I'm going to show you how we might do that. The first thing we're going to do is look at this piece right here. This piece of Purple Heart is on there so that I can slide that over and make a identical cut each time. But before we start cutting, I have to turn on the saw and cut off the end of the segment. And then I'm going to measure that segment off a standard known dimension of 15 degrees. And so it is very, very accurate on here. So we'll do the same here, and it's right on there. I cannot see light under the bar. So I know my segment is good. Now it is important that I position this correctly, because one way I'm going to get the thing won't fit together. So I slide my segment over and touch this and push it through. Now I'm going to flip it so that I'll have the same angle on both ends again. And as you can see, with this piece of wood, they're not catching. And so it's a big safety feature. And so I just cut 4 segments of the wood, and as you can tell from that, you can cut a prepared piece of wood in very good order, very accurately with this setup. And the integral part of this setup is this table saw sled. It's a Dubby. I don't know why they named it Dubby, but that's its name. It's by Inline Industries, and it's out of Webster, Massachusetts. This comes in a left side and a right side. I have both, but I have never set up this side because this side works well. It is set up for this saw, so you have to go through a lot of things to make this work, but it really works accurate. I can go up to a 50-degree angle by adjusting this knob. I don't want to adjust it because I'm set dead on, and I can extend out my arm. So it's a neat piece of equipment. Okay, we've got our segments cut, and we're ready to make a ring. And we'll make that ring out here on the end of the table saw by rolling up a 12 pieces of this on a piece of painter's tape. When I get ready to roll up a ring of the wood, I made myself a very simple little tool that snaps onto my workbench, and I then have a piece long enough to roll up a 12-piece ring. And so here's a 12-piece ring out of the Podoc that I have already put together, and these pieces are the segments just like we made, and they're fitted toe to toe and are then rolled up into a ring, and we see if the ring is a good looking ring. And this ring is a good looking ring. So we would then unroll it and put glue on the end of each piece and then re-roll it. And when we have it re-rolled and the glue is in, I use rubber bands to fasten it all together and make it into a nice stable ring while the glue dries. Now I do not have glue in here, but I'm just going to illustrate that with the rubber bands. So we take the rubber band and we hook it over the rig, and I use 3 rubber bands on almost every one that I do, with the exception of an occasional large ring in which we'll use metal pipe clamps like we would use on a plastic pipe. And with these you can really crank it down very, very tight. And I have pipe clamps big enough that I can go around a lot bigger ring than this, whereas this size ring, rubber bands work really well. Okay, so we have a ring then made, and when we're getting ready to glue that, we have to worry about glue getting on the various structures. And so prior to doing that, I use something as simple as paste wax for your automobile, and I spread it out so the glue doesn't stick. Okay, I'm going to move on over here to a different spot and bring some partially finished rings back to show you. I don't care how accurately you position the rings, they never come out completely flat. Even this one doesn't have any glue in it. It's not flat, and it's all cut out of the same piece of wood. So here's a ring that has been glued up. It's for the 12 people ring, and the rubber bands are still on it, as well as the blue painter's tape. If you look at it very carefully, you can see that this ring or segment is not as high as this segment, and if I turn it over the other side, it's pretty good. And that's because when I'm doing these, as I'm setting them up and I have the glue in, I take my trashy little hammer and I pound on them so that they all level out on one side. And by having them level on one side, then I can sand this side very effectively. One other thing that I typically do is to run these corners through a disc sander just to knock the edges off. It makes it easier to turn on the wood lathe when I get to that step. And so I'm going to move on over now and show you a partially assembled bowl and how we go about assembling the stackable bowl. We have just glued up a ring, and the objective of that is to have a very nice smooth ring without lumps and bumps that we can in fact glue into a bowl and have a good sides, no gaps in the bowl. And that is something like this nature. This one has been sanded. As you see, there's still some blue tape on it, but that will come off as we do the lathe work. What we in reality get is one that looks like this. It still has the rubber bands on it, but it's got all kinds of ups and downs, and so we need to smooth that off. Well, one of the things that I do very early on is to knock the corners off. Where these fit together, we have corners, and by going to a sander and knocking those off, it makes the lathe work so much easier. And so we then feed this through this jet sander, and this is a jet is a manufacturer, and its size is 16 inches from side to side, and so you can actually do a 32-inch piece in there if you choose by having it sticking out here. But so the thing now that we have to do is to run this through the sander, and if this is flat, all of these glue marks will disappear. All these chalk marks will disappear as it runs through this sander. Inside is a belt, sanding belt, and so it takes it through the sander. I'm not going to turn on the vacuum, that makes too much noise. but I'll go ahead and run it through and turn on the One thing I always do is start with the sander high. Last chance to tear up the bolt. Still a little bit of a chalk mark right there, so we're going to run it again. Now it's looked very good. There's no chalk marks left, which tells me that this whole thing is flat. And I've already ran this side, so I know it's flat also. And that gives me then this flatness of this ring, and they are ready to be glued together. Maybe not these two, but they're ready to be stacked. So let's move on over to making a stack of rings for a bowl. When we have the rings assembled and are ready to make a bowl, I like to use the walnut base with a piece of cedar glued to the bottom. And you can see there's holes in the cedar base where I've already had a faceplate on there and have turned this round. But what you can't see is down in that hole is a center point of this piece of wood. And I do that so that I can reorient it in the lathe at a later date. Now, when I make that, I have this piece of walnut, and I have my metal faceplate, and I have a Forester bit in there. And so I'm going to push the Forester bit down, and it just happens to be in that hole in the center of this now. I intentionally use screws that are longer than, if I can unscrew that are longer than the thickness of this base, so that when I'm putting this together, I will have 3 points of orientation if this thing should come loose, if the glue joint should break loose between the cedar and the walnut. Now, a question that you probably have is, why am I using the cedar? Because it's easy to take off the bottom of the bowl. And I'm just trying to make my life simple and yet have good strength. So I'm going to move this one back out of the way, and we're going to take a bowl that is partially put together, and we're going to sit it in here. And so now we got this seated, and we can take one of the multiple colored rings. We can put glue in here all around. Now remember, this has been sanded and is very, very flat. We put this in, and we get it lined up, and I make an effort to have the joints not lining up, because if you try to make them line up, you get it all screwed up. So this is ready to be have the top put on it, and the top then is this piece, and this white on this MDF is glue, or is wax to prevent the glue from sticking. Now, one important thing when you're doing this, number your holes, because I don't care how good you are, they're not going to all line up independently. So I'm looking for hole number 4, which is right here, and it's going to line up with that one, which means the others will line up then. And so you put that in, take the rings, and I found that if I put these rings in upside down, or these caps in upside down, they do a very good job of holding it, and I don't have to screw them down as far. Now, when I'm doing this, I have the capacity to stack the whole bowl at one time. And when I do that, invariably one of these rings will shoot off a little bit, and I'll have a ring that's out of place. And so I have started doing the bottom and the maple piece, and maybe the sapelli piece as my first glue up. And then I'll glue up another 2 pieces. Those 2 pieces being the wingy and the redwood. And I'll let that first thing set for, maybe a half hour. And then just go ahead and stack the others right on it. But without any glue between the piece that I've just glued and the piece I'm going to glue. All I'm after is having the form. And I can build that bowl up that way, but I still have parts of it unglued. And by doing that, then I can have the bowl ready for a final gluing. And if I have 2 or 3 glue joints to perfect, I can handle that. I just have a problem with 6 of them at one time. And one other thing that I do a lot of when I'm taking a bowl, and I've got this one pretty well done. It's ready to be put in the sander, in the lathe. When I'm doing this, if I go ahead and glue on my bird's eye maple top, it becomes a taller bowl. A taller bowl is more difficult to do on the inside, and I have to reach in under the ring so that this comes out wider inside as well as outside. I found that if I take this ring, this bird's eye maple ring, Grace, and leave it off until I have this turned, very much like I have these others partially turned, and I'll show you that in just a second here. This bowl has been turned down here. It's ready to have this red piece turned, and before I turn that, I will go ahead and put on top a 12 wood piece. That way when I'm turning, I've got all of this turned, but I've got this bottom part turned, and it's ready for a metal faceplate that can just be screwed right back on. It just makes turning for me simpler. It's your bowl. If you don't want to do it that way, it's okay, because I don't care, but this is how I do it. And so it's like that, and then it will get this piece at the end of the turning. So from this point then, we are ready to go to the lathe and to show you how we might complete the bowl. With the bowl, the safety of the bowl, or of the person turning the bowl, I use a leather vest and I use a face shield that protects my face and head as I'm turning. And when I have it done to my satisfaction, then I will sand the outside of the bowl with the lathe running at a slow speed. This is running about 250 RPM. And by doing it this way, I can sand it down. I will generally start at 80, sometimes even as low as 60 grit paper, and work my way up to at least 220 grit paper. One of the former shop assistants took one of these and went to 1,000 grit paper on the outside, and I don't remember the ends of it on the outside, and that bowl was certainly slick. And so, but you want to keep your hand where you can feel how they almost feel soft when they're sanded so well. And so we get the whole thing sanded, and on the outside, and I do the same sequencing with a very aggressive sandpaper like a 60 grit on the inside. I'm going to turn this off, and you'll see that this will turn itself. And many times I'll use my hand to slow it down. And I'll work up from 80 grit up through 220. And occasionally to a 320, which I have these little pieces of sandpaper for. So I go from the coarse paper up through the very slick paper, and then when I'm done with my sanding, particularly on the outside, the podok, which is this redwood, the blood of Jesus wood, will darken very much like cherry will darken with light. And so to keep that from darkening, I will turn on the lathe at a very slow speed. And now I'm running about 130 RPMs. And I'll take my shellac and we're going to spray the outside of the bowl to help preserve the color of the Podoc as it will darken with light. And I want it to stay as a very light, or very dark red, but a very red. And then we go to the inside of the bowl and we do the same thing. I try not to breathe the shellac, even though it is a relatively safe finish to have close contact with. And I typically leave the bowl turning for at least several minutes because the shellac will dry more uniform without a run if I have the thing turning, because there's no place for it to run. It just keeps thinning out the runs. And following the shellac, I will then go to either a lacquer or a polyurethane, and I generally use polyurethane, and I like the gloss polyurethane because it just makes them shiny. And we'll finish that bowl off so that I can do all the finishing except the bottom of the bowl in a short period of time. And so at this point, we're kind of waiting on paint to dry. When we have the bowl finished with our choice of the shellac and the polyurethane, and we take the cedar plate off the bottom and we recess the bottom of the bowl, and then we take a Brother label maker and we will put on the bottom of that bowl something pertinent. And I'm looking for Jeannie's bowl. Yep, here it is. This is bowl number 4. It said, from creation to salvation, for Jean in 54 great years, July 21, 2016. It says, love you, Marvin Wright. So we make those bowls, and we have a bowl insert that we put in each bowl when we give them away so that they can read what the woods are. And this one is for the grandson of my shop assistant, for him to give to his grandfather, who is getting remarried. The man lost his wife to cancer, and so he's remarrying, and so we're going to give him a bowl. And that bowl will have, like my wife's bowl, wherever I set it back down at here, I think it's right here. Nope, wrong bowl. Anyhow, it will have a bottom on it that looks something like this. With those tape in place, that's from a Brother label maker. With that in place, then I shellac the bottom of the bowl so that label maker tape is in there as a permanent part of the bowl. I'm Marvin Wright once more, and I thank you for watching. I know there are going to be questions you're going to have. When you have those questions, feel free to call me. Our phone number is 260-563-7674. And once more, thank you for watching our video.